just like that, it's a typical Wednesday night.
The switch pitch hour.
Yeah, I've seen that it's now blowing up in the chat. That everyone's waiting for me to say switch pitch, so I might as well bring it on in less than 5 seconds.
That's right. 10 seconds. There it is.
Just own it. But yeah, we already got quite a few of them in here tonight, and we'll run down the list. But it is your Wednesday night Tech Talk Live show. So first one in the whole place is Lars LP94, Michael Robert Embry, Mr. John Wilburn with the cat paws, Danny Boyd, Miss Cat G, Buff Del Campo, Potter County Patina. That's a new one. I haven't heard of that one, so welcome. 38 Racing, Bruce Coltgen is back. Slant Daily Garage giving me crap about the switch pitch hour, and Clayton's Toolbox. Fab Race Mod Repeat, hello from Total Obscurity Motorsports Stables. Paul Pihoe, he says, it's cold here in Massachusetts. Hello, Buff Del Campo. Michael Schmidt, let's see, Mean Street, Mopar, Big Mike's Hoopty Barn, NSB Custom Cars, Dust Devil Garage, Danny Boyd, and let's see, Bear Rose Garage is in here. It's time to switch the pitch. Junkyard D's asking, have you switch pitched today? So, and it's better than switch hitting, I think.
Right?
Doesn't that mean you bat from the other team? I don't.
Yeah. That means you're a switch hitter. Yeah.
Okay. Who won the switch pitch pool? I don't know. It was me. I had 5 seconds. So,
actually, okay. I greeted with switch pitch hour. So
did you? Levi's Backyard Performance is in the house. SSR Performance, Val 360 Jimmy. And let's see, Dave Norman is here. One-Eyed Cat, Don. Let's see. So they're throwing me off here. John Wilburn saying, hello, Dallas, Professor P, Switch Pitchers chat. All John was just live over on his channel trying to get Mr. Dust Devil Garage up over 1,000 subs. So
trying not to. You know, they're using that like,
yes, he's doing the opposite thing.
Reverse psychology there.
Yes. And I remember when Austin did that from Daddy's Money's Garage, and it worked out really well. But there you go. Danny Boyd says, now you're messing with a son of a pitch. Oh, a son of a switch pitch.
Right. That's the best one so far. That's a good one right there.
Yeah. What's up, y'all switch pitchers? Well, you guys are going to you may be giggling now until I put a switch pitch in my project for No Name Nationals. I'll do it.
So one thing I do have today, top of the hour at 8 o'clock, is I do have Mr. Predator Carburetor here. So,
dude, there's one local to me for $300.
Yeah, well, so I got 2 of those, and these are the bitchin' ones because these are the extra.
I shouldn't go grab it.
So we'll talk about Predator.
Okay. Did you? Weren't you supposed to bring something else in from work or something?
I don't know. Was I? Because I was busy.
I don't know. I can't remember. Who knows? Let's see if we got any questions in the chat yet.
Yeah, Danny Boyd. That's the. He says 2 Predators on the tunnel ram. That's exactly the point. I got 2. 2 of them. So yes, that's the idea. Is to put 2 on a tunnel ram.
All right. So Michael Robert Embry says, Dallas, have you finished shaping your Easy 302 pistons? Also, will your Easy 302 have a switch pitch? Shane brought it up. Well, one, no. It won't have a switch pitch. It probably won't even have an automatic. But the Easy 302 pistons, I literally just filmed that today. So I haven't had a chance. I just got the engine tore apart, and I need to get my my rotary tool out and start shaping some pistons up. But it won't be long, and I'll have it all chopped up and ready to go. Shane and I were just talking before this live. It's amazing how many haters I get on those videos about like, oh, you got to bring number 1 piston up to top dead center so we can see how far down the piston is in the hole. And guys are second guessing everything that I'm doing, and they think I'm full of crap. And it's like, just go back and watch the videos that explain everything. I have nothing to hide. I'm just having fun with this. But it's really weird. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't really care for the the monkey pit or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, I think what it is, they're just upset because they didn't think about it. This is what I said earlier.
I think you may be right. I don't know. There was so many guys like, I did this before. Well, if you've done this, How come it's not all over the internet? How come you're not bragging about it? How come, you don't have a video of it? Yeah, I mean,
And
it's
why aren't you
just
trying to tell me how to do it then? If you've done it before, you know all the pitfalls.
well.
So
So
there you
I
go.
actually filmed something like that for the video today, and I left it out because I got kind of pissed off where people were like, "I've already done this. It doesn't work out that easy." Well, if you had already done it, why didn't you tell me about the pitfalls of the chamber hitting the piston dome? Why
Hey,
didn't you tell me that? Because you've already done it. They didn't
I
know. That's why.
we got more important news. Big
What's
Block
it?
402 saying that he's got a triple crown call out coming tomorrow.
Oh, dude, that's gonna be cool.
So
Let's see.
that's huge.
Where's that one at? I don't see that one yet.
It's,
Have I
it's
got
third
that
from
far
the
yet?
bottom.
Huh?
Third from the bottom. Fourth from the bottom now.
Let's see. Okay. Oh, yeah. So is he going to do that live on his channel then, I guess? Why don't he just do it here?
Yeah. Send him a link and we'll have him call it out. Well, he's probably making a video. So,
well, does he
yeah.
want to do it live right here on Wednesday night Tech Talk Live? Let's see
Well,
here.
have him make a video so that way people can share it. You know what I mean? Start
Oh, yeah,
sharing
you're
it.
right. Yeah, the video would be the best.
Video's the best.
All right. So Clayton's Toolbox says custom race torque converter versus off the shelf. I assume there is much more than stall speed involved in a custom converter. I will be looking for one soon, trying to educate myself. No switch pitch. All right.
Okay,
Well,
so I can explain this really good. Usually, when you get an off-the-shelf converter, they're usually for one type of torque level, and they're designed for one type of weight with a gear, with a tire, and that's why they have a range. And then usually that range will say for 400 horsepower, 400 foot-pounds of torque, whatever it is. So if you go more than that, it's going to go higher. It's going to go less than that. It's going to go lower. That's kind of your starting point. The thing about a custom torque converter is it's made specifically for you. And it's not like this is voodoo magic. There's really not many combinations that haven't been done anymore, and everybody knows what's really going to work. Especially with people using the 245 style converter, which is kind of like the Chevette, converter that they use. A lot of people still use those. They're very popular, so they know exactly what top, what bottom, what stator to run, how far to keep the spacers off. With Torrington bearings, they know exactly the efficiency. They know everything about it. So yes, they're expensive, but I would say that a torque converter, custom one, is the way to go, and it's made for your application.
yeah. In my opinion, you're just wasting a whole bunch of money if you're just not buying a custom converter.
Yes.
It is going to cost you more, but what I'm getting at is you won't have to buy anything twice.
That's right.
So I found that, I'll give you an example. When I first put my T-Bird together, I had a converter that would have been, I thought was like, okay, well, it was a 3,000 stall for a small block Ford. And I figured behind this 427, it was going to be like probably about a 4,500 stalls, kind of what I was figuring it. It was about a 5,000 stall. The problem was at the top end of the track, it was slipping at 29%. And the way you measure that is like, if you think about it, when you're in high gear, the engine and the drive shaft should technically, since it's a 1-to-1 ratio, should be pretty much within like 1 or 2% of each other. Okay. Yeah. That's what you call lockup on the converter. That's like, it's not like a lockup, like a direct lockup, but that's where it starts to couple, right?
Fluid couple. Yeah.
Fluid coupling. Okay. Mine was slipping at 29% at going through the traps at the track. The motor was buzzing at 7,500 and the car's running like 118 miles an hour or something like that. It wasn't going very fast. And when I sat down and did the math, the only way I did was just work it backwards. The tire diameter and, the gear rear and gear ratio. And then you can figure that to be your drive shaft speed. When your drive shaft speed, if you're bouncing off your rev limiter and your rev limiter set at 7,500, your drive shaft should be turning 7,500 as well. Yeah. So any difference in from engine RPM to drive shaft RPM is converter slippage. That's it. And so I mathematically did it. It was 29%. So I called up Pro Torque. I had a converter custom made. They went from a 10-inch converter to an 8-inch converter. And lo and behold, now my drive shaft, my torque converter slip is less than 6%.
That's perfect.
Yeah, that's exactly where it's supposed to be at. And what's neat is you can actually watch the torque converter work because it'll be in high gear up to like say it'll always pretty much just stays at 4,800 RPM the whole time, right?
Stays there, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, when the RPM starts to come up, the tires will balloon like instantly,
and then it
right?
comes back on the converter.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
You-
When you got it right, it's cool.
Andrew Nelson was saying that he picked up about 0.4 of a second with the recent change. That's true. I just did that converter for the ZF8 HP Chrysler, for the Chargers and Challengers. That converter picks up half a second by doing nothing else. So it definitely makes a huge difference because it does. A lot of the one thing that always mystifies me is the little name of it says torque converter, but yet they rate them on horsepower. It's the most mind-boggling. It literally converts torque. That's exactly what it does.
Let's see. 38 Racing said, here's a tech question for the Triple Crown class. Can the suspension mounts be reinforced, repaired, and or gusseted? Yes.
100%.
It just has to be the factory placement pickup points. You can't move them or change them from, like, let's say it was the factory style triangulated 4-link. You cannot convert it to a leaf spring, or you can't convert it to a torsion setup, or a ladder bar. It's got to remain the triangulated 4-link.
And not a real 4-link, like an actual straight on 4-link.
Right. It can't be back halved. It can't be tube chassis. It can't be any of that stuff. It's got to be the factory suspension pickup points. They can be bolstered. They can be gusseted, and they can be reinforced.
And we encourage that because we want everyone to be safe.
Yeah. Hot Rod Guy Garage says Dallas is going through what I'm going through with my GM headed Cleveland with comments. Sounds like, yeah, these guys seem to already think that they know it all. They've done it all before, and I'm second fiddle. But you can't find a video or a write up on a forum or any comments that can help you at all trying to figure it out. So it makes you wonder, did you really build one? I'm probably leaning towards no. But yeah, Dust Devil said that everyone is trying to be an expert. Dallas, you on something new, and they're jealous, probably.
Exactly. 100%. I agree with that right there.
Buick Smith says, is the Easy 302 being built for your S10? No, this is something I actually just came up with, and I thought it was really cool when I came up with the idea. And to be honest with you, I gave it to Jeff at Two Hacks Garage about 4 years ago now. And he ended up going just a different direction to do his dragster. And I was like, hey, man, I'm really needing some new content after this whole divorce snafu and all that jazz. I said, would you mind if I just did the Easy 302? And he was like, no, dude, it was your thing anyway. So I'm like, all right, cool.
I remember that. I remember in 22, we were at PRI. Me and Jeff were talking about that 302 engine, making a camshaft for that. I remember that.
Yeah. And I was trying to do it with all factory pieces so you could compare it against an original DZ. And that's where he and I differed. I actually kind of regretted giving him what I thought, because it is like that was kind of get thrown by the wayside. He thought it was a cool concept, but he was wanting to build something that was like full race. And I'm like, oh, dude, you should compare it against the original. And that's where we differed, just in artistic thought on how it should be presented, right? Either way is fine. It was just like, you want your way to go, and he wants his way to go, and that's it. Let's see. SSR Performance says, I'm pumped about the Triple Crown. Cool.
Me too.
Val 360 Jimmy, don't worry about them Dallas. Everybody's here, has your back. I appreciate that. We do have one of the greatest communities here on YouTube. Some of these other cats are running around, like pretty much lone wolves. But our community is like a hell of a lot of people, Yeah. So
I get a kick out of those guys. They go around thumping their chest like, I'm the man. I'm I'm so bad I should be in detention.
I should have all the attention. That's me. Unity Motorsports Garage is in the house. And Andy likes my new video. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I'll get another one out next week where I'll have the pistons hopefully clearanced up and all the video editing done, and maybe turning this thing over, finding out how much piston to chamber clearance I have. And when we hit 40 thousandths, it's time to just screw it back together for the final time. Okay, so Big Block 402 says, yes, making a video call out person has almost the exact same setup as what I'm building.
Perfect.
Oh, that's going to be cool. That's going to be a good race.
Yeah.
Michael Schmidt says, come on, Dallas, you're a rookie. Yeah, I'm a rookie. And it says just yanking my chain, but that's fine, you know. Okay, let's see. Buick Smith says, okay, a couple of 3Cs. If the car is under 3,000 pounds with the weight discounts, do you need to use the small tire or do the discounts not go against the weight? You got to use the small tire.
That's the whole point. That's why there's no advantage. You got to find that 3,000 was the number and over. So if you're under that 3,000, you got to run the smaller tire.
So here's Levi asked a question a little while ago, and I think we kind of just skipped over it.
Oh, okay.
He was asking one. He says that's the info I was looking for. He wanted to know if 1 ton or camper special square body Chevy trucks from 87 to 91 were special order or were they available on the lot? And the answer is both. It depended really where you were at. If you were in Southern California, where there was a lot of people that had campers and tow campers and the whole 9 yards, those camper specials seem to be on the dealership lots more than anywhere else. If you were in, let's say, Connecticut, generally they'd be like a 1 ton they might have, but a 1 ton with a small block and a 4-speed, they probably wouldn't. You would have to order that, but they would have the run-of-the-mill 454 Turbo 400, or even the, let's see, 91, you could have got the TBI 454, I think, with the 4L80E. I don't remember. It was the first year there, it was right around there somewhere. Oh, yeah, and that's where Angie Nelson here is saying that about the converter change. That's you. So I'm way behind already.
Yeah.
Let's see. Michael Schmidt says, Tech, how hard is it to convert to E85 with a carburetor?
It's pretty simple. A lot of companies sell kits for it. I'm actually doing videos on how to convert my alternator, but basically it's just a metering block, more flow, and changing some of the O-rings, and make sure your pump and your regulator can handle it. Make sure it's not going to eat it. But here's the thing: don't let it sit in there. After you use it, take it out, keep some extra fuel, run it through, start the car up on regular fuel, flush that crap out there. It's really simple.
Andrew Nelson, he actually, Andrew called me when all these guys were telling me I had the wrong stroke crank, I had the wrong pistons, I had the wrong rods, the whole 9 yards. And Andrew called me and was like, no, dude, you're doing it right. So he's saying here, you're the only one I heard of using real 302 pistons. Everything folks did years ago used the 350 pistons with the L99 rod. I love what you're doing. Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate it. I did consider using the longer rods with a LT1 piston, but it still only gave like 9.5 to 1 compression. You couldn't compare the DZ to this with only 9.5 to 1 compression to get run all over.
Yeah.
So that was why I did that. And maybe it's just dumb luck. But let's see. Paul Pihoy says, when choosing valve springs, how much cushion do I need for a 500 lift cam for the max lift spec on the spring?
You want it 50 thousandths before coil bind. So what I would do is measure the valve lift at the actual valve. Make sure it's not a hydraulic. Use a setup spring. But 50 thousandths to 70 thousandths is where you want to be before. That will basically stabilize the spring at higher RPMs. Now, if it's not going to go over 6,000 RPM or 6,500, it's really not necessary. Make sure that your spring pressures at that point are more important than as far as getting it to max lift. If it's about, say 65 over, say 7,000, I say a lot is a magic number. Try to get it 50 to 70 before coil bind.
All right. Well, and Jason's garage is in here. Howdy, Jason. It's been a while since I've seen you, buddy. Levi's backyard performance. Is the gray area encouraged or discouraged to have something in mind? Is that for the Triple Crown class? Throw it out there, dude.
Yeah, just you can text me, Levi, and I won't tell anyone, and I'll tell you if it's too much gray. But yeah, it's encouraged. That's the whole point of it, is that we're trying to make it so people can, have some fun with it and work around things. Too many rules makes things too crappy.
Let's see. 38 Racing says, I watch YouTubers that admit they don't know everything. We can learn together. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I I will definitely say when I don't know what I'm doing, which is a
Yeah.
lot of the time. If I do a video on something that I've never done, like I got another one coming up after this. I'm doing a 300 Buick that's a streetable version of the Jack the Giant Killer with the long 350 Buick rods with the rod to stroke ratio that's 1.96 to 1. And it's using off the shelf stuff, small or not even small block Ford, 3.8 liter V6 Ford pistons and a 350 Buick rod and a 300 Buick crank and a 300 Buick. And then it'll have about 10.84 to 1 compression. So it's going to be pretty healthy on the street. And it has a cam and the whole 9 yards. All right. So let's see. Okay. Unity Motorsports Garage, 38 Racing. You're exactly right. None of us knows anything. And I know a little about something and about a whole lot about nothing.
Yeah.
That leaves me confused. I know less than I did before I started. But that's pretty much how Andy's hitting the nail on the head. I think I learned more from the comments than I did when I did the research on it before I even started the videos usually. But
well, I work for the industry. I mean, I work for Edelbrock, but you see in my garage, I tinker because nobody knows everything. This is the kind of stuff that there's like, well, will this work? I don't know. Well, let's try. That's why I keep trying working on things.
I like the tinkering side of it because in my opinion, that's true hot rodding.
Agreed.
Right? That's where it all started from. Grumpy Jenkins didn't not buy a single part from Summit Racing, right? When he started doing it, it was everything that he made out of his own garage. Same with Smokey Unic. Same with all the pioneers from the get-go. That was true hot rodding. That's what it was all about. It's about understanding how it works and then coming up with a vision and following through with the vision. I mean, if you fail, you fail. But if you win, man, it feels great when there's nobody else standing next to you to take credit for what you did.
Yeah. And it's Andrew Nelson's in here. I'm not going to tell anything about specs. I promise you I won't. But I custom made some specs for his 4200 that he's working on, and
like
it took me a long time. What's that?
Like a cam?
Just yeah. I basically I made specs so that we could regrind it, but it's really they're it's not really raised, it's not really this, it's not really that, it's not really anything. It's its own deal. It took a long time because you're trying to get one thing to work with something else that wasn't really supposed to be made to work together. So you're having to try to get the so you're not cutting a lot on the base circle. You're not doing this. You're not doing that without giving any way of his information. And it took a long time to get it right. So that way it would keep the spring under control. And I loved it because it was like it was an absolute challenge. And it was like, you figured, oh, I'm just going to plug some numbers in there and it's going to kick it out. People, that's not the way it works. You have to make it. You have to run it. You have to run through a simulation. You have to get, they supplied all the weights. And then you're running it up to 8,500, and then you're having problems. Then you run it up to 9,500, you have issues. Then you start seeing like short-term and long-term wave harmonics. So like you'll get a harmonic at say at 5,000, then you're getting one at 10, and you're like, oh, okay, well then those are the half wave. And so you're like, you're trying to find where the power band is going to be, trying to get all those frequencies out in that power band, and it's fun, and you figure that there's been hundreds of cam guys, thousands of cam guys over the years, but this is the kind of stuff that I love tinkering with. That's why I love doing the little side projects, because you always learn from it.
The thing I always liked about like this kind of stuff, there's so many variables that you can do on it. And Andrew and Calvin Nelson, if you haven't been to their channel, is Nivlak 57, right? And Calvin did a video, probably a year ago on a North Star V8, right? And it's like, these are so cheap in the junkyard, you can go get them, and they're absolute killers. They were like 6-bolt mains, and it had like a whole entire girdle system that captured the crank, and it was really awesome stuff. And I really wish he would have went a little bit further into like the history of that thing, because it goes way back to like the 1980s.
Yeah.
And in the 80s, there was an engine that General Motors produced that was this unbelievable. Okay. And most of you probably never heard of it, or maybe a few of you had, but was called the Quad 4. And the
Mhm.
Quad 4 was 4 valves per cylinder, 4-cylinder. Okay.
Awesome engine.
They were like 245 horsepower and 300 foot-pounds of torque, 4-cylinder. This was in the 80s when the
Naturally
V8s weren't
aspirated.
even 245 horsepower.
Yeah.
Right? And it was like, what in the world is going on here? Well, what happened is Oldsmobile essentially stopped making engines, and General Motors went to corporate engines, and they got rid of the Quad 4, and it got rolled into General Motors corporate. But they realized, man, we can make a really badass V8 out of that,
Hmm.
and that's what they did. And it's called the North Star V8. That's that's what it is. I really, really like the North Star because I really, really liked the Quad 4. Naturally aspirated, they were badass. One year there, like 91 or 2, they made a turbocharged version that was even more badass. But they had problems with them, like pooping out head gaskets and puking out rods and stuff like that. I mean, they were literally, too much power for what they were.
The ignition system was a real issue with those. I
Was it?
worked with that quite a bit, the Quad 4. I worked with a guy named Jim Fueling. Do you remember him?
No.
Jim Fueling. You'll have to look it up, but he basically donated one of his land speed record cars to this race program I was being part of. It's called Code 4 Racing on San Diego. It was a bunch of cops that were trying to get people off the street to drag race.
Okay.
So I was part of the program, and I would build their cars for him. Well, Jim Fueling donated one of his cars, one of his car. It set like all these land speed records from like 85 to 91, 200 plus miles an hour. And so we took the engine and transmission out, and it's actually in the San Diego Automotive Museum. We brought it there, and it's on display in a case there. And we put a Quad 4 engine in it, back into it. We made a transmission. We got all the good gearing for it, and we put 150 shot of nitrous, because I like nitrous, on that thing. And that was one of our cars that we would race at the Code 4 Racing down there at the stadium in San Diego. And so I was teaching like we used to do this thing called the Chiefs Challenge. Well, not everybody else was cops except for me. I was the street racer, and so I would take them out and show the Chiefs how to drag race, because they were like, "Oh, you just go up there and smash the gas." I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's not really like that." So yeah, but I did get out a free jail card from one of the chiefs of police, of San Diego. So
Oh,
that
that's
was pretty
cool.
good. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
well,
good.
San Diego had a big street racing problem in the 90s. It
Well,
was called, they didn't have a track.
yeah, and that was actually the reason why I got popped for street racing. But I wasn't street racing; I was actually watching. And so I didn't run. Yeah, so I was like, I'm not racing. I got popped for it. And so because of that, I had to do community service. Just happens to be the community service was building race cars for the
Oh,
police department, San Diego PD.
oh, awesome.
That was pretty good.
Let's see. Let's catch up here. Junkyard D says, is the Triple Crown weight in cubic inch numbers measured to the decimal or rounded up, i.e., is 368.99 over? Yes, it'd be 367.99 and then 368 and then 368.01, you're over. But let's say you showed up at the Triple Crown race at No Name Nationals being 368.99 cubes. Okay. One, probably no one's going to really sweat 0.99 cubes.
We'll just have a
In
vote on
reality,
it. Basically,
well, we've already talked about if you're over or if you're over cube or underweight, we're going to give everybody else racing the opportunity to make the decision if you can run or not. And that's what we're going to do for the first couple of years, probably until we can, until everybody kind of gets into the swing of things. Okay. And we've realized, okay, now we know if you're over, it's probably a ringer. You need to go by the wayside. Right?
yeah. But as far as the weight is a hard number. 3000. If you're 2999.5, you're underweight. And that's basically you get weighed at the end of the race. So it means 3,000 pounds or over at the end of the race.
But you can be 2999.5 as long as you have the right combinations. The minimum weight is 2,700 pounds.
Yep.
Okay. So, but make sure you guys read the rules. You understand the rules. If you have any questions, ask us, because we'll be more than willing to help you. We want to make sure that you pass when you show up for, do you fit in the class? Think of this like boxing. Okay, that's what this class should be like. You show up, you meet the class weight, and if you're Mike Tyson out there and you knock suckers out and you made the weight, guess what? You're doing all right.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see. Michael Schmidt says, on those engine builds, do you analyze piston speed generally, or do you just send it? I don't analyze anything. A lot of it's already been done. You know, what I try to do is comparable rod to stroke ratio. The Grump used to say the closer you can get to 2-to-1, the better. And then Shane has told me that as well. But there has been a lot of studies done that says it doesn't make any difference. But when you put them together and you hear how snappy they rev and how quick they are to respond, there has to be some kind of gain to it that's immeasurable at this point, right? Because it does sound completely different, and it's so snappy, and it whacks the tachometer like super fast compared to what something with a really sharp rod angle would do.
Yeah. Now, the 2-to-1 is when you're getting really high up in the RPM range. That's what we've had this conversation many times about that. The 1.48 number, if you're like 7,000 and under, I wouldn't even worry about your average piston speed, really. I mean, it's really not going to be a factor for that. You're just going to build a little bit more torque, and it's going to be a little less prone to detonation. But the higher you get that RPM range, start worrying about that.
Jason's Garage says, I'm going to need some help tuning a Q-Jet for my 5.3 deal. No problem, dude. You guys got my contact info. Just get in touch with me, and I'll help you as best I can. I just need to know what kind of Q-Jet it is, and then where you're starting at and what you have in there, like metering rods, jet sizes, the hanger on the secondaries, and then the metering rods for the secondary. And then, like I said, best to do would be like get the carb number off the side so I can understand which carburetor you're messing with. Let's see. Mohawk 62 says, I had a quad 4 and an old Pontiac Grand Am. They were in stuff just like that, and they were pretty stout, actually. There was a company that used to make parts for the quad 4 that made it look like an old Auburn converted 4-banger.
Yeah.
Or Arden converted 4-banger. That's cool.
It was cool. I remember those.
And Andy says the stupid plastic coil covered deal was horrible.
Absolutely. He knows exactly what I'm talking about, because that thing would fail and you would have to change the whole thing. It was ridiculous. You had to take the valve cover out. It was just a pain in the ass.
Oh, Andrew says he's okay. We will do the next round of the North Star later this year. I just got through the next round of surgery, so I'm laid up. I didn't know that, dude. Hey, get better.
Yeah.
We need you back out there straightening the world out on anything that's not pretty much even stuff that is a small block Chevy. So yeah, but I hate to hear that, but I'm glad you're finally getting the surgery that you needed after this accident. I'm sure that's what it's for. Man, what did I get on my glasses? It's terrible.
Oh, someone was asking me about the rod ratio again. I think one more thing that would be more important too is as far as you can get how light your weights you can get. So like if you can get your bob weight down, aluminum rods, titanium rods, or raise the pin height, get your compression height down. But as far as bob weight, get that as low as possible. And then try to get I would think that's a little bit more important than closer to 2.1. But if I had the choice, I would go weight first and then try to get as close to 2.1 as possible.
So the reason why I was doing this for this Buick 300 is because, one, nobody makes any parts for it, right? So you're pretty much stuck making your own stuff and figuring things out. The Buick small blocks, the rods are all interchangeable. They'll go from one crank to the next. It's just the length that changes. So the good thing is you go with the big long rod from the 350 Buick, which is a 6.385 inch long rod. You can use some of the newer pistons with the really short compression height. And that's what makes those things really work well on the street and get good fuel economy, is that short compression height, long rod combo. Generally, when they also have the short compression height, means that they were made after 1996. So the other benefit of it is they normally come with a thinner ring package, like a 1.5 millimeter, 1.5 millimeter, 3 millimeter ring package, which now they're down to 1.2 millimeter. And that's equal to like a 16th ring. So the thinner the ring that you can get, the better ring package that you can use. The Napier style rings are much more efficient, and rings are a big gain, guys. Big
Huge.
gain. If you're wanting to knock some horsepower into something and you don't have a big budget for it, like the big one used to be 302 and 351 Windsor Ford. They went to the metric ring packages in the mid 90s. Okay. If you were running just a 302 Ford and you just had some, let's say 1979 block 302, it had 5/64 ring package. But the ticket used to be just go get a set of pistons and rods that guys used to throw away out of like a later model 302 and put new thinner rings on it, drop it in your 79 motor, and pick up another 20 horse.
Instantly.
Just rings. That's it. So that's the big deal. It is a big deal. So parasitic drag is what that is considered. See, Danny Boyd says, will quad 4 heads fit on any of the GM V8s? I don't know. I bet if anything, it's going to come close to would probably be a North Star, but I don't think they will because I think the bore spacing on it is like really short. I
don't know that answer.
Those were 2.2 and 2.3 liter engines. I think it's North Star might be the only thing that's close. Let's see. Michael Robert Emery, that's great community service. Shane, tell us more on why the police department needs race cars.
Oh, because they were trying to get racers off the street. In San Diego, they used to have
what was that? Race Legal? Is that
race
what the
legal?
program
Yeah, they used to have a racetrack there, and they actually had 2 racetracks side by side, so 4 cars could go down the track at the same time. They had a faster track and a slower track.
Hold on, though. What he's not telling you, it was at the stadium. It was at the San Diego Chargers Stadium parking lot, and that's where they had the tracks at.
Yeah, so the cops would have this thing and they would sell like hot dogs and hamburgers there to get money, and then they would have a bunch of cops come by, and then you would race the cop, and if you won them in a bracket race or a heads-up race, you would get the T-shirt, and it was just kind of like a community service thing. So yeah, it just happened to be that it was like the right place at the right time to get community service. So yeah.
Oh man, I got my glasses like something on them, like oil.
Oh
maybe?
yeah,
I don't know.
in the film.
Yeah, it's so I can't see through it. It's like having milk on my glasses. Okay. Bear Rose Garage says my daughter lives 3 blocks away from the San Diego police station on University Avenue, Little Saigon.
I know right where that's at.
Yeah. Okay. Tall Garage is saying I have questions on stuff I'm doing. It's all getting jumbled. So now I'm here and on the spot. I can't remember what I wanted to ask. All right. Well, hey man, you got another hour and 20 minutes left. Figure it out. Let's see. Blue Grit Garage says, what is the cost to enter the Triple Crown over the No Name Nationals registration fee? Shane and I haven't really discussed anything yet. I don't know what we're going to do. It won't be a ton of money because I don't want it to be a money thing where it keeps people out. If anything, it's just going to be probably for a winner take all prize money deal.
Exactly. Or maybe a 1, 2, and a 3. It depends on the car count. If it's a lot of cars, we'll do a 1, 2, 3. If it's not, then we'll just do a 1. But yeah, definitely it's going to be all back to you guys. Whoever wins.
Okay. So Andrew Nelson says the assembly weight is more important. Look at modern pro stock.
That's actually what the person was asking me at the same question.
And then he also says the long rod allows for lighter pistons. Aluminum is 2.5 times lighter, but if the piston is 8 times bigger than the rod cross section, you lose the weight battle.
Yeah.
Assembly weight beats rod ratio.
Well, that's what I was saying. Is that I would pick weight over rod ratio, but I would definitely. It depends on RPM speed too. But yeah, no, I do agree with that. I mean, I always.
Let's see. SSR Performance says, Dallas, what do you put in the 302 in? Nothing. I'm actually just doing this for find out what it's going to do, so I can compare it against an original DZ 302, and then maybe I might revisit it with, okay, I didn't cut any corners, but what I did is I sacrificed a lot of power because I went with factory parts. It's got a dual plane intake manifold. It's got a LT4 hot cam. I'd like to revisit it and go back to use like a single plane or even like a Performer RPM dual plane, and then we throw a hot cam at it that's designed specifically for that short stroke, big bore design. And then maybe since the original DZ302 was a solid lifter motor, we go with the solid roller motor for this thing and see how it really does then at that point. But I'd like to leave the Vortec heads on is what I'd like to do. Let's see. And then Junkyard D asks, Triple Crown question, why not allow E85 for budget reasons? I'll let Shane answer this question. He was the one that was pushing for the all gasoline.
Yeah. I don't want to play with the E85 because then you can control. I mean, how much do you control on the methanol then at that point? I mean, how much do you control on the alcohol? How much do you control any of that stuff? The gasoline makes it a much more, and then there's a lot of different things too. That if you're running alcohol or methanol, then you could be putting a little bit of nitromethane in there. A lot of people do that. I've played with nitromethane before. It's really easy to disguise. This just makes it easier. It's just a gasoline 110, 112 type of deal.
My idea behind it was you can go to any given town in the world and get race gas or something that's high octane gas.
At the track. They sell it at the track.
You cannot go to any town in the world and get E85. And that way it puts everybody on a level playing field, right? So we can show up, let's say we show up at the track. And if you've been to No Name Nationals before, the past few years, Barkley sold fuel out of his trailer. Well, Barkley doesn't have E85. And you not having E85 would inhibit you from racing. But you know what? Everybody has race gas. So you can and Barkley always shows up with race gas, 110. So you can pretty much get 110 every time you come to the No Name Nationals. That was kind of the idea. But let's see.
He was thinking of that. I was thinking on hiding it for how to make more power than everybody else by disguising inside of fuel.
Shane, Levi was messaging you his idea.
That's actually
okay. Michael Robert Emery asks if am I dynoing the EZ302? Yes, I'm going to dyno it. I actually already have a set of hitters I bought months and months and months ago when I ran into this piston to chamber clearance issue. It's kind of slowed things up, and then life got in the way, and everything's kind of slowing down. And this is the kind of hazards that you have when you trip over stuff that nobody's done before because nobody has answers. And right now we're learning them. So, all right. Buick Smith says, are no hot bars on GM cars or GM A-body cars legal? They used a stock upper mount on the axle for the A-arms, but has another hole to reposition the arms higher on the axle. If it's a stock application, no hot bar, yes, you can. If it is not a stock application, you cannot move the pickup points for the suspension.
Yeah.
Let's see. Lout Burns says we had the cop races here in Hudson Valley back in the 70s. It was so much fun. Cops had fast cars too. They had one when I was in Hawaii called Beat the Heat. And that's what I thought was pretty cool. And then Danny Boyd says that a lot of cops are card nuts. And I think that's because a lot of cops actually end up coming from the U.S. Army, which has a lot of car folks in the U.S. Army. Let's see. Val 360 Jimmy says lifters with axle oiling versus without. What would you recommend on my 6.4 Hemi? I've decided to go Holly Terminator X and a turbo.
Okay. On that one, especially on a Gen 3 Hemi, always go with the axle oiling. And there's a reason for that is because the way that block is designed, the cam is literally in a tunnel. So there is almost zero splash oiling. So you definitely want to get as much oil to that roller, and also that's going to put more oil on it. That's the number one cause for why these things would fail. The lifters is they don't have any oil going up there or any oil, and there's no splash oiling going up there. And that lifter lays so flat that there's a little fish mouth up on top that really gets no oil. And that's actually what would cause a lot of those lifter failures, is that would stop the lifter from moving up and down and actually would take the wheel out when people would think it's the cam's going bad or this and that. It's actually the lifter stopping and then would kill the wheel and then kill the camshaft. So always get the oiling if you can.
Let's see. Fabrice Mod Repeat says, when Dallas and I came up with the quick draw series, the very first tech question I received, how much nitro percentage do you allow and can I use benzene? So that's why gasoline makes it simple.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't run away. Let's
We
see.
don't want to police people too. That's the whole thing, is we don't want to keep policing. This is to be fun.
Well, it's all right. If you think about it, a lot of the stuff that we did, to tell you the truth, is kind of for lazy tech. Because
It's true.
all right, if you go through and you have all gasoline, I don't have to have a wet bulb and go through and check every freaking tank to make sure it's not over 85%, ethanol, right? If you're running E85.
Yep.
It's pain in the butt.
Yeah.
So the idea was just to make it simple.
And with C12 and C10, we know exactly what the color is supposed to be. We know what it smells like. You can just, cars running, you just walk behind it, you can tell what it is.
Let's see here. Danny Boyd says a great engine for the Triple Crown would be the 1963. I think it was Pontiac 326. The first year 326s were available, 336 or something like that. We're going to pump them anyway, but the whole idea is, and I brought this up last week. I think B&R Racing was asking about Pontiacs, and I told him, I said, the 326, and he doesn't want to run anything small like that, but that's what the class is designed around, is a small cubic inch engine. So the whole idea was, we told you before, 327 steel crank, cheap, right?
Yes.
I found one, I showed one here like a couple of weeks ago, was like $100 for a steel crank. That would be like thousands of dollars a few years ago.
Yeah. And around my area for Mopars, 318, 1970s, that means steel crank, that means stick bore, that means everything good. $300 or $400. That's a whole short block right there. So that's your crank, that's your rod. That's a block that you can bore, 90 over, and then you'd be right at, 331 cubic inches, whatever it is. Be perfect.
Let's see. 38 Racing, the no hot bars move the mounting points on the axle, not the chassis. I would have thought that would be okay.
Oh, on the axle is fine.
On the axle is fine.
Yeah.
If it's moving it, I was assuming that he was talking about it. It gave extra points for mounting on the chassis.
Yes.
Right, on the factory body.
Yeah.
So as long as that's no bueno.
Yeah. As long as it move the pickup points like on the leaf spring, it's fine.
Yeah.
Because technically, then, if that's the case, if those weren't outlawed, then a Caltrax couldn't work. But Caltrax can be just fine because it's on a leaf spring.
Danny Boyd says no 1967 or later 14-degree heads on the 336 though. If you're talking the Pontiac, if it was a factory 14-degree head, you could run those heads.
Yep,
that was the idea. SSR Performance, do they make a new DLC code lifter with the EDM oiling hole? I don't think it's necessary now with the DLC coding.
Well, you couldn't, because the EDM hole is going to now it's going to be a stress point. The whole idea to it is that when you DLC coat the whole lifter, the hardest thing was actually finding an edge on the curvature, so that way it wouldn't flake off. When you put an EDM hole through the center of it, and
now it gives a hedge like 360 degrees.
Yeah, it's gonna break that edge right there, and you technically don't need it now at that point. There's really no reason for it. I think I've showed the lifters before, but the ones I have here, I have two boxes. The one boxes were used lifters, and the ones that I'm putting in my Slant 6 for the turbo for Plan Z, those are used. They got 10 million cycles on them, and I showed a picture of them. They look brand new. They're literally like mirror glass.
So Bear Rose Garage says, growing up near a submarine base in the middle of the Idaho desert, wink, wink, that's submarine propulsion plant base. If you know anything about submarines, the propulsion plants don't use kerosene. I bought a lot of cheap go fast cars and trucks from Navy guys that were shipping out. This is my luck always in the Navy. They were a dime a dozen. So let's see. Buick Smith. Dan, but the 326 weighs around 600 pounds. That is the downfall of the Pontiac V8.
Exactly.
With the intermediate block. They all have the same weight. Matter of fact, I think the lightest ones are like the 455, where it has the biggest bore and the shorter and the big stroke. So that's because it has the least amount of block. Let's see. Let's see. SSR Performance says the small motor is a big advantage if you can get down to weight. I can't, so I'm using a 350. So
Perfect.
last week I was kicking around the idea of trying to jump into the Triple Crown class. I really don't want to jump in there with a ringer, but I've been talking to Nick the Van Man, and there's a 1976 Vega on Marketplace that's already been V8 swapped and 4-speed swapped.
Perfect.
I wouldn't mind buying that and putting the 302 in it, and then come for everybody's lunch money, because I would leave the Quadrajet on it. You know me. And Quadrajet and 4-speed means I could weigh, what, 2,700 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the car to do it with. I just don't know. Like, the rear end in those things was originally a 7.6 or 7.5 inch, 7.5 inch 10 bolt. They're the ones that used to puke the ring gear out the back, even if you just went from ice to asphalt. So I don't know if I want to buy a 9-inch Ford for the thing, but it definitely would be fun to drive. That's for sure. Okay. Being on Racing says my diamond pistons and total seal rings I bought was $3,300 for my 1974 Trans Am Ram Air 4 4-speed.
Wow.
Well, they're probably custom made. It sounds like the
Yeah.
rings probably not too much, but the pistons for sure. Michael Robert Embry says, think of the Screaming Threes as a gentleman's race, like in golf, where you call your own fouls and not cheat. It's not like NASCAR where you can try and cheat every chance you get within the rules. Yeah, I'd like to think of it that way, but I'll guarantee it ends up like NASCAR.
Yeah. But at the same time, the whole idea of this is we're trying to make everybody have that feeling of a heads-up competition, so that it's not like a bracket race. We want people to have that 28 10 50 experience without the $100,000 28 10 50 car.
Okay. Danny Boyd says the Buicks are the lightest, I think. Yes, they are. The big block Buick weighs 25 pounds more than a Chevrolet small block. And then the small block weighs 150 pounds less than a Chevrolet small block. So that's almost 2/10 right there if you run a small block Buick just on weight. So imagine that amount of horsepower you could give up but still be competitive. Let's see. Okay. So Levi's backyard performance. No one says you can't lighten the block up. That's true.
Yep.
But you got to remember, you're running a weight to cubic inch class.
That's right.
Okay. Weight you're going to have no matter what. It's just putting the weight where it's most beneficial is the ideal thing to do. And to do that is picking the right engine, transmission, and car combination to get the weight where you need it to begin with, and then adding weight to other spots that are beneficial. Let's see. Loutburn says got a sweet 96 Chevy 350 engine. Hey, man, go get yourself a L99 crankshaft and then and a set of DZ 302 pistons, and you'll be there. Tall Garage says, how do you guys feel about no gap rings? I think the no gap rings are actually more efficient than the 2-gap rings. I like the 2-gap rings. They seem to work really good.
I've tried those total seal rings back when the total seals had the gapless top and the gapless second. I've tried them on the dyno. I got to say, I was getting more blow by with gapless rings. So as far as cylinder pressure, I had on the Cookie Monster, I had gapless top rings. I put gapless second rings on it, and it ran better with just regular Hastings, decent rings.
So here's Danny Boyd saying I need to put an 8.8 Ford in that Vega. So I guess I need to go buy that Vega and cram an 8.8 Ford in it, and problem solved.
I can narrow it for you.
Well, it can't be too narrowed, right?
Huh?
Well, I guess it has to be narrowed somewhat,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what. Yeah. And then Danny Boyd says that a Fox body 8.8 might be perfect in the Vega. Just grind off the control arm mounts. That's true. All you'd really need is just a spring purchase off of the 7.5 inch, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that would be pretty cool in that Vega, though. Let's see. Blue Grit Garage, can the block rub on the firewall? Sure.
Yeah. But if it's a distributor, you got to have a spot for the distributor too. If it's a, small block, most of them are in the back, unless it's a Ford.
Let's see. Tall Garage saying, I hear the gapless top and second rings causes weird stuff. I was going to do just the top. I remember when these were like the ticket in like the late 90s or early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the gapless top and second ring setup. And they're not like gapless like you think.
It's just two rings on top of
it's
each other.
Two rings. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's nested.
Channel.
Yeah.
The problem was I want to say you had to cut those. And you had to gap them yourself. It took a special ring gapper because they're cut at a bevel, cut at an angle, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's big problems with the angle cut because it's actually more surface area when you cut at an angle instead of just straight across. Because the point of like the closest point or the shortest distance between 2 points is straight line. So that's straight cut. If you put it at an angle, it actually gets more distance because you throw the hypotenuse in there is what you're looking at. And so it technically creates more area for it to leak. But
exactly. Well, I can tell you right now, I did the topless,
gapless top rings.
And then they never, at the time when I did this, they didn't have two gapless rings. It was either the gapless top or the gapless second. So the first one I got was the gapless top, right? And I ran into the same issue that you were just talking about, is that, to cut it too, it's not just a flat cut, it's a curved, beveled cut, right? So it's like this compound angle that you have to get right. And it was a pain in the butt. Now you tell them your bore dimensions and you got to give them down to thousands. They would make them and put them in, but it never sealed right for me. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to try the gapless second. Maybe I need the top one to kind of control this and whatnot. The second one was even worse. Now, maybe they were still perfecting it. Maybe
I had oil control issues the whole time. Whole time.
It would foul plugs, everything.
And I had oil control. Now they worked because it did make more power, but man, it had oil control issues. And the fucking things, if you want to drive it on the street, don't even think about it, right? If it's a full race application, sure, knock yourself out. You're going to change them out the following year, it'll be perfect. But man, did it have oil control issues from day one. And I ended up doing every single old trick I could to get them to seat right, and they just never would. And after you spend $300 on a set of rings, you find out it's a lot easier to spend $75 and know they're going to seat.
Yeah, and I tried them with nitrous. Now they like you said, when they're racing, they worked great for me. But see, I was a street racer, so I would have to drive it to and fro. So I would get there and I would have to change my plugs.
If you're smoking like that on the road, they'll pull your ass over.
Exactly. Right? And that's
they'll
what happened.
Kick you off the road. So
yeah. Yeah, they were like $300 back in the late 90s. I remember
they were expensive. And I think I did 2 seasons of them. And no matter what I did, I could not get them suckers to seal right. And originally, the only reason I did 2 is because other guys were having such good success with them. I tried them out, and I thought I had gooned it up. I thought I did something wrong the first time, right? And I'm like, oh, well, I'll try it again. And this time, I'll be very meticulous about it. And I put them in there. And what was neat was I figured out I could gap the ring with like 2,000 grit sandpaper instead of using that crazy wheel. And it worked out well because what you do is you just pinch the ring and pull one side up over the other, and you just do it with your finger essentially.
Yep.
And
same thing.
It worked good, but they always seem to smoke. Always, no matter what I did, it smoked.
I tried different like honing practices. I tried everything. I even went over to different engine builders. Like, have you ran these before? And they're like, nah, man, just run the regular rings. And I tried both, and they worked great for racing. If you're only at the track, they're fine. But for me, at least at that time, I just never went back to them. I just never had good luck with them.
Yeah, they were supposed to be worth like 5 or 10 more horse, but I just, like I said, it probably did because my car ran really good. They ran better than I had ran before. But was that because I just refreshed the motor? Was it because, I put some different springs on it? Was it because, there was like 20 different things it could have been, I guess. But the rings, I'm telling you, I always have problems fouling plugs. On a nitrous car, you're always pulling plugs and you're always changing them. And when you foul them, Come on, man. It's got freaking 300 miles on the plug.
Yes. And that
Yeah.
was the problem is I would get to the track and I would have to change the plugs street racing. That's terrible.
So Old McDonald has a car brings up a very solid point. Don't forget it, starting a keto diet and being on it 250 days plus can help performance.
That's right.
This is probably the fastest way you can gain ET as a low buck racer.
Is yourself.
Yeah. Go out and lose 20, 30 pounds. Like I'm telling you, 100 pounds is worth a tenth. So, 20 pounds is worth 200s, right? So that's what you're looking at.
Yeah, when I started racing again, I went down. I'm 190 now, so I stay right there. I'm a healthy weight, and I'm not adding extra weight to the car.
Okay, so Hot Rod Guy Garage says, yeah, man took stock suspension mounting points from the same make and model car, but a different year would that technically fall into stock mounting points. He needs to use the stock mounting points from the car that he's trying to race.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why this car here, that technically this is a triangulated 4-link from a Mustang that's on the Cookie Monster, but it would never pass tech because this car came with leaf springs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. Andrew Nelson says gapless top and gap second, less noise in the ring pack.
Yeah, vibrate less. Yeah. Yeah. But I just never could get them to seal right.
Oh my God. Tall Garage says that those same rings are $500 right now.
Well,
so they were $300 at the beginning of the 2000s. I do remember buying them because I was like, golly, you could buy like 3 sets of rings for that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I tried it twice. I didn't learn my lesson the first time. I tried it twice.
I did the same thing. I thought I gooned it up the first time.
Yep.
And I did it again. And so it's all right. You live and learn. What I found was I had the gapless top rings, and I found what was better was all the later model pistons had the thinner ring packages, and those were just the gain you got from those was like 75 to 80% of the gapless ring.
Agreed.
And you didn't have any seating issues, and they were available at Napa, right?
I'm all about the modern ring packs. That's what I've been running now lately in these things, and it's worth easily once you get over 700 horse and RPM. It's worth 50 horsepower easily.
Michael Schmidt says, Ring Tech Hastings, do you detension the oil scraper rings to reduce tension or reduce piston to wall friction? Second, if there are 2 compression rings in an old school build, would you delete a compression ring? I would never delete a compression ring. I have seen those, and there's pistons out there that only have one.
Yep.
Okay, so cheater oil rings. I've done things with the cheater oil rings before, but I'll tell you what it ends up doing. It ends up scoring your cylinder walls really bad. And but what you'd normally do, the cheater way to do the oil ring is, let's say the motor is 30 over. Okay. If you can buy a 20 over ring pack, you can use the 20 over ring pack, or you can file a 30 over ring pack and give yourself twice as much gap. But
it's not worth it though.
It is not worth it. It's easier just to put it on. If you really want like something like that, Total Seal sells some rings that they'll slide in place and take up the space, but they don't hit the wall. And you can use the short oil from like the later model rings, like where it's the 2 millimeter oil ring, and you can use that short oil expander in there. And then you put your regular rings on top, and then shim it in with at the top of it with the I don't know what they call them, expansion rings at Total Seal. I think that's what it's something like that, expansion or gap ring. It's for stock eliminator guys. Yeah. Stock eliminator guys have to use pistons with certain part numbers on them, and those pistons have a 564 ring package. But nothing says you have to use the 564 ring package. So what they do is they buy these thin metric rings or full race 43 thousandths rings, and they stack these ring packs in them that bind that thin ring in that large ring groove, right? Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. And so those are available, and you can do that. One downside is it probably will smoke. I'm going to let you know that.
Yes. And that's the problem. I just run a regular ring pack and just call it good, like a modern day ring pack.
Junkyard D says, are fiberglass fenders permitted? No. Fiberglass hood, bumpers, deck lid, I think was the only things we had, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But
we still wanted them to be like cars. That was the whole idea.
Yeah, we wanted it to be like a more cost-effective version of the regular guy's pro stock class is kind of what you're looking at.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. And the idea too is that we didn't want to go too far, too deep. Like I said before, when we first started this, you could drive through the No Name National pits, and there's no less than half the cars that could literally run in this class next year. Yeah.
Let's see here. Clayton's Toolbox says, what about ordering a Napier second ring to reduce friction? You can do that. So the cheater ways the guys used to do it with stock eliminator way back in the day was you would go to Napa and you'd buy the single ring packs and you'd buy like 20 of them. And you'd find all the rings that had the least amount of tension. You'd find all the rings that were the thinnest, and you'd put them on. And that stuff still applies. But the amount of effort that it takes to do that is not worth the time to just go buy a good set of rings.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is if you get a decent set of pistons nowadays, all the pistons now have the modern ring packs. Just get that if you're going to buy pistons, and then just get regular rings for those. And it's going to be fine. You'll be light years ahead of all that time wasted.
Right. And if your pistons aren't available with the modern ring pack, like I said, I just told you that Total Seal makes rings for that. They have the expanders in there. You buy the expanders one time, guess what? You can use them over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah. Because it's just a ring surface that wears.
Imagine as a shim. Imagine a shim.
When I tell you that it's going to smoke, do not be surprised when you start it up and it smokes.
It's going to smoke.
It's going to smoke. Think about it. You got all those little shims in there, and oil is getting past that. It's getting pressed past that by the compression itself. The more surface area that you have that is open, the more oil it's going to burn. I'm just letting you know that. And then here's the other cool thing is if you buy those thin rings, you can gap them at like, say, 15 thousandths. That will help some of the oil seal, but it's still going to smoke. Okay. Levi's backyard performance. So is there an equation that you can use to calculate the amount of air an engine will use in an 8th mile pass?
Well, yeah, basically just whatever your bore and your stroke is, the RPM, and then how long it takes you to go across that. Really, it's
cubic inch to CFM, and then it's going to change based on RPM.
So you just take your average RPM. So like usually a car is going to launch at 5,000 and they're going to go from 5. The converter is going to come up to about 6. So you figure 65 to 7,000. So just put it at 6,700 because that's going to be your average time. Just do it 6,700 for like say 7 seconds, and your cubic inch. It's really that simple. An RPM times it by 8. Do it by 1. Get that number, then times it by 8. But now remember though, is that that's at like that's only if you're like, there's different things for like camshafts, overlap and so on and so forth. That's just what the engine is going through the engine, not whether you're burning that fuel, using that air or whatever. That's just the amount of air going through the engine.
Paul Garage saying, I'm just trying to figure out what ring package to make on the custom pistons for the Hemi. Okay, so if you're going to have custom pistons made, find a ring package first that is the ideal one. And what you preferably use is something off of like a newer Japanese version engine. Yeah. You can do it off a newer American version engine too, but those ring packages seem to be harder to find than the Japanese ones. I don't know why.
Look at an LS or the Gen 3 Hemi because those ones are very, very common.
But he's doing like a 241 Red Ram, right? Mm-hmm. What is the bore of the 241 Red Ram?
I don't know.
Is it like 3.5 or 3.7? If that's the case, start looking at like 4.6 liter Ford stuff. because that would be where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Is that maybe 5-liter Ford or 4.6 Ford? And I'm talking like 5-liter Coyote. And I don't know how big is the bore on a 5-liter Coyote. It's still pretty small, right? Like 3.7 something. Dizzy Izzy is asking, can the rear spring mounts be moved inside the frame rails?
No. Only to the frame rails. But they have to be in the factory, like, point.
Okay, so this is a good question. This has actually come up a couple of times, and Shane and I do this ourselves. This is something that Tall Garage asks, you want to have a head torqued on when you hard block, or how's that work?
Yes.
Okay. The hard block, when you fill an engine block with that, once that hardens up, that's the dimension the engine is going to be in.
Forever.
Okay, so if you got it on a stand and you hard block it, it's going to hard block with that flex in the block. Okay. The ideal situation to do with when you're going to hard block the block, first, you want to have a block that's been blasted clean, chemically clean, to where it's completely clean, because you want that hard block is an epoxy and you want it to adhere to the inside of those water passages. And before, that used to have antifreeze in it, or maybe even some oil in it. You want to have it blasted clean. You want to have it burned. You want to have it boiled. You want to have every ounce of
crap
out of those water passages. Okay. The other thing is, you need to determine if you're going to take it up halfway through the water passage holes or all the way. Okay. Now you only need like an inch down from the top of the block.
Depends on stroke. Depends on stroke. I would go at least. So if you have a 4-inch stroke, I would go half the stroke, or just usually up to the bottom of the water. Yeah. Okay. On this car, I have it to where it's the bottom of the water, and that's about 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 inches down.
What I do know is like just the bottom of the hole for the water passage, just to the bottom of that is a safe bet. Any block, and you can generally use it on the street afterwards. Okay. If you start going halfway up the hole, you're starting to get greedy. It'll work good for some engines, and some engines it won't. It'll be hot. And if you go higher than that, it's a race only application, right? Okay. The other thing is, you want to have no machine work done to it, period, when you hard block it. Okay. Because when that stuff sets up, and like he's talking about here, you want to bolt the head on. You can do it with the head or with torque plates.
Both heads and main caps.
That's what you prefer. And put a crank in it if you can.
Yeah. Put it all. What I did on mine is I set mine up on an engine stand, but I had pieces of 2x4, so that way it would level out, and it was evenly weighted on either end. I leveled that area out. I already had the other head on. I had a crank in it. I had the main caps put onto it. Everything was torqued. I put the head on, and then I used a vibrator, like like your impact, air impact hammer, but I put a dead blow on it with a brass hammer. So then that way, basically it was vibrating and it was getting all the air bubbles out. Yeah, as I put it in there. And then I basically did that and let it settle. And then it took 2 weeks, and I didn't touch it for 2 weeks. Then I did the exact same thing the other side. I flipped it over, and it took a whole month to get this thing to set up right. And the big thing is, if you're going to drive it on the street like this, the one thing that you have to consider is that your oil temperatures are going to go through the roof. If you're going to run a hard block on it, you're not really going to affect on your cooling. It's really going to heat on your oiling, because it gets hotter on the bottom side there, and there's really nothing cooling down the oil there. So I would run an oil cooler if you're going to run hard block. Definitely look at it on the street. If it's on a race car, I wouldn't even worry about it.
The ideal situation would be bolt the crank in, bolt both heads on, and put it on a table, and then hard block it. Because the table is going to let it rest naturally. It's not sagging from an engine stand, or it's not held with 2 bolts at a different. You want it level as possible, and you want it to where the weight's distributed evenly on that table. And then once it sets up, then you take it and you have all your machine work done. And what you're going to find out is you probably need more machine work than what you thought, because you bolted the heads on and all that stuff. And the hard block just exacerbated some of the irregularities of the block. But the cool thing is when you get it back, that sucker is going to be true, and it's going to stay that way for a really long freaking time.
And if people want to know how I take a factory block on a small block Mopar and make it semi-live, hard block. This is a factory 87 block that's in this thing, I think. And it's hard blocked. And that's the only way to make them survive is hard block. It works. I couldn't afford one of those R3 blocks at the time. So I was running cheap blocks. Just make them last. How much weight does hard block add to the average engine block? Mine added 50 pounds to mine. 50, 50. Because it's literally like concrete.
Yeah.
I think mine took 3 gallons. Mine was 1.5 gallons per side of hard block is what it took.
Let's see. Michael Roberts says, "Hey guys, with small block Chevrolet engine mounts bolt onto a big block Chevrolet engine, I do not have a clue. I really don't. I'm not a small block Chevrolet guy or a big block Chevrolet guy. There is a lot of people in here that are like 38 Racing. He's saying yes, I would go by that because he is a Chevrolet guy.
I was going to just say yes, because if the transmissions are the same, distributors are the same, it should be the mounts are the same.
So, okay. BNR Racing says Pontiac Overhead Cam 6 is a good engine. I had a chance to pick one up free a few years back. Should have. It was a Sprint 4-barrel. I always wanted one of those. I always wanted one because it was a true overhead cam design, inline 6.
Really?
And if you go back through like GM history, there's not a lot of inline 6s ever designed by Buick, Olds, or Pontiac after pretty much 1955. So I always thought that was interesting. I wanted to get one on the street, see what kind of mileage they got and what kind of performance they had, because you could get them in you can get them a Firebird, that Sprint 6. I'm thinking it would probably get somewhere between 26 and 28 miles to the gallon. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's what year did those come out?
67 through 69, I think. But you've probably seen them. They got this really bitchin' cast aluminum valve cover. Really cool looking from the factory. Let's see. Tall Garage says I'm going to a hard block and Iron Duke block. Well, you know what? That one would be probably fairly simple. But yes, bolt the head on, and if you can, put the crank in it. Or if you got a table, put it on a table. You don't have to put the crank in it.
Fortunately, the new engine block that's going in this thing with the Gen 3 Hemi is one of those BGE blocks. It's literally kind of hard blocked from the factory. So the water passages is only at the top half of the cylinder, and it's basically cast iron the whole bottom. So yes.
Okay, so Buick Smith says, Shane, so antifreeze is 9 pounds per gallon, so you really don't add too much more weight. I don't know how much antifreeze you pour in your junk, but like mine only holds about 3 gallons, which is 27 pounds. So I mean, he's talking 50 pounds. That stuff is heavy. When you get the bucket of it, you're going to be impressed, and that's because it doesn't even have the water in it yet.
Yeah,
you know, I don't know. Is it water-based epoxy? I don't remember. I think it is. Okay.
It was warm. I believe it was warm water. I did it so long. I did in 2016, but I believe that it was like that Moroso hard block stuff, and it comes in 3 gallons, right? That's how you buy it. And then you put it with warm water and you shake it up. And then I went and got all these little red funnels, and I, poured it all evenly because, and then vibrating it and stuff. And, so yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, it was much heavier than water.
It is heavy.
Yeah. And I run
Racing says that the inline 6 is 3.8 liter the first year in 66. Okay. Well, then I knew they were available in the Firebird. I just didn't know. Maybe they probably came out in the Tempest. Then 4.1 liter after overhead cam 6. That's the Chevy 250 or 250 straight 6, but that's a Chevrolet design. That's why I like the Buick Olds Pontiac. I like the Pontiac overhead cam 6. I've always been in love with that thing. I always kind of wondered, that was in the heyday of Pontiac. what would have happened if they would have made a 280 or like a 389 with that same kind of design. Let's see. Danny Boyd says in the 60s, GM offered fuel injection, turbocharging, and overhead cams, not to mention air cooling. Yeah, they also had rear engine, front engine, and mid engine, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, a big block saying that he feels like his big block holds 11 gallons. You know, I think my race car here with water, I think it only holds like now because I have a really efficient, small, thin radiator, electric water pump, and I have all that concrete in it. I think it's only holding barely a gallon and a half, 2 gallons in the whole cooling system because it warms up fast.
That's how mine is. My T-Bird, it's like literally 1.5 gallons.
Yeah,
Doesn't hold jack crap.
Yeah.
Okay, so Fab Race Mod Repeat says hard block and good balance job. Most stock V8 blocks can handle about double what folks typically think they can.
Yes.
And that's 100% true.
Yep. I'm running about 1,000, maybe 1,100 out of this thing, out of a factory block.
So BNR saying that 67 to 69 Pontiac overhead cam 6 was 4.1 liters. Oh, that's pretty cool. I did not know that.
That's good.
I thought they were all the 3.8. Okay. Heavens Mopars is saying, is a windage tray necessary on a 70 340 tunnel or 340 running a tunnel ram and 4-speed? Has comp cam. That's the cam. Has high volume oil pump, stock oil pan, using it for more street. I'm thinking not. Dude, if you got a high volume oil pump, one, I don't know if you've put it together yet, but I wouldn't run a high volume pump
on a stock pan. No.
Yeah. And two, if you run the high volume pump, put the windage tray on because you're going to have so much oil coming back that it literally is going to need that windage tray probably just to make the same amount of power it did with a stock pump and no windage tray. And
windage tray is just free power. Just know that that's free power that you're just wasting. I would always run a windage tray if you can, and it's you can do it. Put it on there. It's free power.
I never run a high volume pump especially with a stock pan.
Yeah.
You have the opportunity to drain that sucker hardcore, especially with that cam, because that cam you can wind it up pretty good.
Now here's a little lesson in this. Is we've talked about this oil pump thing. My race car here, I run this thing to 7,500. In fact, I went to the traps one time at 8,100 RPM at No Name Nationals in this car. That's got a stock volume pump on it. Now it's got a lot because I'm moving volume, and my oil pressure is only 65, 67 pounds. I'm moving more volume than I am pressure because I can put more volume through it. And I would rather have that than the pressure. Just you don't need I know it says high volume, but you don't need the high volume. I'm running a stock volume pump on this. I'm just opening up all the passageways because the factory pump is more than sufficient to a stock replacement pump. If you can open up the passageways bigger, it will pump enough oil.
Danny Boyd says, I'd love to check out an overhead cam 6. A guy in my township when I was a kid put a Monza 5-speed in place of a 3-speed in his overhead cam 6 Firebird. That's cool. That probably really made that thing giddy up and go.
Yeah, that's good.
Tall Garage says, Fab Race Mod Repeat, then Poo Ford 302 Ford still splitting in half. They're not that poo. It's just the fuel injected ones that do that. The early ones don't have that problem. But the number, if you look at the internet, they're telling you 450 horse, and it's actually kind of all over the place. Originally it started, they were saying 660 was the number. Then it became 600. Now it's 450. The reality of it is it'll handle a bunch if you don't detonate it.
That's the thing. Yeah. Rattle them.
Yeah, you rattle them and they're done. I was running a 302 Ford that made 430 horse on the motor, and I hit it with a 150 shot off the line and another 150 shot at the 60-foot mark. And it lived for like 2 seasons like that. Just had good pistons. And as a matter of fact, it didn't even have good pistons. It had TRW forged pistons in it that were used. But they're beefy, and that was one thing about TRW forged pistons is they didn't freaking melt. You didn't melt them down. Let's see here. Okay. So, yes, I think the number is probably around 660. You think 500 horse?
If I'm building the engine for someone, I tell them 500. If I'm doing it for myself, it'd be 600.
Yeah, I think the small block Ford will do around 660, 600 horse, somewhere around there before it starts really having problems. Usually what happens first before you start breaking the block, because I broke one of those blocks. I pulled the main caps, and the main cap walk really bad first.
Yeah,
You'll see it,
hear
like the bearings will just be chattered up, and you're like,
Yeah.
"What is this?" It's like, how did it get bronzed on one side? And it's not
Yeah.
even like the thrust side, right? Like
And you look at the bottom of the cap, and it'll be scratched there. And
shattered all up. Yeah,
yep,
like it's been jumping around on the block. The
exactly.
blocks are they're just flimsy right there in the center, and it's because the deck height is so short. I think that's the big problem. But the earlier blocks don't have that issue. And if you get like one of them, 74 and earlier blocks, they don't have those problems at all because they're all virtually based around that Boss 302 block. So let's see. Tall Garage says, I'm getting a big block Mopar 400 and building a 451 as cool as it sounds.
Perfect.
Bobby Frizzell says a 302 will handle a lot more power than the internet tells you it will, and that's 100% true.
I agree.
Okay.
But like I said, if I'm building it for someone else, I tell them 500 horse.
Levi's Backyard Performance. So curious, is having a throttle body against the rules? I'm making an adapter that has a carb on top and throttle body in middle or in front or middle. If you got a carburetor on it, that's all you need, dude. You want to run a throttle body or a restrictor plate, that's up to you.
That's weird.
Yeah, I'm going to let him make something that's probably not going to work. But go ahead.
He probably wants to run the carburetor wide open and then run the. But then you're going to miss the auxiliary pump.
Right, but I think let's just think if you had a carburetor, and I don't know what his configuration is going to be or what it's going to look like, right? You put a throttle body below it, you're going to have the linkage attached, right? So, I'm not busting your balls. Generally, when you use an EFI intake manifold that has a throttle body on it, it was meant for just air.
That's it, exactly.
And when you start adding fuel and air in there, you're going to find out you're going to get a big decrease in power because the fuel is going to puddle in all those runners. And I think what happens is when you go through that throttle body, even though it is a large throttle body, I think once it hits peak volume through that throttle body, I think it's going to pool inside the intake manifold.
It's going to slow down.
It's probably going to fall on its face.
Yeah, the whole thing about a carburetor is it keeps decreasing in size. It goes into a plenum, and then each port gets smaller and smaller and smaller, so it's speeding up. So the velocity keeps getting higher and higher as it keeps it in suspension.
Good evening, folks. Shane, looking svelte and light. Okay, Dallas, dude, you're killing it. In what?
Looking what?
Svelte and lithe, right? So you're like debonair.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Let's see. And welcome Ron Ward, the voice of the No Name Nationals. Okay. Right. Let's see here. Junkyard D is asking, can a stock small block Mopar windage tray be modified to fit with 4-inch stroke?
I've done it before, but it takes too much work. If you're going to run a windage tray, just get the one that comes off the studs. I think the Milodon makes one, and it works. Yes, you can modify it, but the amount of work it takes is just not worth it.
Ron Ward is on this. He says 4-inch stroke, use a crank scraper.
Yeah.
So Ron Ward is saying, is the 351 as prone to breaking the block as the 302? Well, if you go by what the internet says, the roller cam 302 blocks are very much like the 302, where they crack up the middle, and it's because of the hold down for the roller cam lifter tray. That's where they crack. They literally crack right along that thing. And the 351 is not as bad as the 302 because it has a taller deck height, so it has more material up top. But it still seems to have that problem around 600 to 800 horsepower. Who knows really if that's the case? I don't know. And to be honest with you, I stopped in performance application. I stopped using factory block a few years ago because I kept just throwing money in a well. Is what you end up doing. Like, there's nothing wrong with factory blocks, especially if you're doing something that's low RPM, or you're building something that's just, not a ton of horsepower. But when you start doing like lots of RPM and lots of horsepower on them,
Yep.
factory blocks, you'll find the short weak link in them real quick. And what sucks is like when you put your $3,000 rotating assembly in the block that you got $2,500 worth of machine work and a $2,000 set of heads on that, or a $3,000 set of heads, and then you go out there and you tear it up. It tears up your crank rods, pistons, block, camshaft, and maybe even the heads. So the money is best spent on a foundation that is going to live, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. And that was your limitation with the small block Mopar, was it not?
It's 100%. Yeah, I couldn't find, by the time I could actually afford a block, they became unaffordable. They used to be like $2,500, but I just couldn't afford it back then, right? And then now that I can afford something for a block, they're like 6,000 or 7,000 for the exact same block because they stopped making them. That's why I was just like, well, I'm done with this. I'm just going to go to the Gen 3 Hemi, because you can get now a block with a Gen 3 Hemi factory block, a BGE, can handle 1,700 horsepower. The factory crank is good to 1,500, and it's got bitchin' heads right from the factory. So I'm light years ahead right off the bat.
Danny Boyd saying used a Mexican 302 block. First Responder Garage says brindled main caps is the term from Capwalk. I did not know that, but thanks for throwing that out there. Brindled main caps.
Oh, is that the term?
That's the term they use for the scratching on the underside of the cap where it's moving around.
Okay.
Andrew Nelson says 500 horsepower on a 302. Block failure is too random. Can't predict which one will fail. And he's right, because it just depends what year. All right. When I started racing 302s, the Mexican block 302 was the one everybody wanted. Okay. Because it was made out of the same cast iron as the diesel engines were.
Yeah. The gray cast iron. Yeah.
Right. Then the ticket used to be the triple X 5-liter block. Okay. And I don't know if it was just because it had XXX casters into Lifter Valley that everybody equated it to hardcore, because it's dang near like hardcore porn. Yeah. But it became the one you wanted. And those came in like 85 to 90 vehicles, maybe 89. I don't know. It could have went longer even in the Mexican vehicles. I don't know. But that used to be the one everybody wanted. And then everybody started running the Explorer blocks because they were so abundant. But the Explorers seem to have the more of the block splitting problems than anyone else.
Yeah.
So
I agree with Andrew Nelson on this. That's why I've always said 500 horse. That's the number when I would build engines for 302s. I would say 500. That's it.
Let's see. SSR Performance says, Dallas, you're sounding like the guy saying your 302 won't work. Let the boy make mistakes. Yeah, you're right. You know what?
It'll work. I mean, it'll work for a while.
Yeah, it will. They all do. They all work for a while. Then you learn something very valuable.
Yep.
Let's see here. Let's see. What are these guys talking about? Let's see. Yeah. Levi's backyard performance. I'm trying to reinvent the wheel, except my wheel probably won't work if I don't try. It'll be mad. I didn't remember an engine as an ear pump.
Yeah, here's the thing is that, remember, they're still trying to make fuel injection better than a carburetor in a racing application. It's hard. Carburetors work very well for what they are.
Well, and you got to remember this is a big, okay, here's something like in your face. The carburetor is like almost 200 years old, right? That's a lot of refinement and redefinition and improvement over fuel injection, which is literally like probably 50 years old. It's a quarter the age. So you give it some time and the fuel injection will be up there. What I think you're going to find is direct injection, as awesome as it is, it has some problems with dirtiness. It will dirty up some valves. It will dirty up some pistons. Port injection, I think, in my opinion, the higher you put the injector, the better atomization you get, but yet the less amount of power it seems to make for some reason. I don't know why. It should make more power technically.
Oh, but in high RPM, I want the injector as high up as possible.
And maybe that's the case. Maybe I'm not spinning stuff hard enough.
Yeah.
Let's see. Mostly old parts. Ron Ward says, Sheen, are you looking for an R3 block and P9 heads?
Not anymore. I was from 2010 till about 2 years ago. So for 12 years, I was looking for a decent R3, R6, something with a P9 head, NASCAR takeout or whatever. Just not anymore. The Gen 3 Hemi is just light years better than that kind of stuff.
Fab Race Mod Repeat says the Triple X 302 block had slightly more nickel in it. And that's interesting because I had never heard that before. I just knew that was the one everybody wanted. And I couldn't tell you why, to be honest with you.
That's a wives' tale, man. That's false.
You think so?
Yeah. I think it's false.
Let's see, Bobby Frizzell says stock blocks will live, but it takes maintenance. I've seen a lot of power go through stock blocks, but where I raced before, but you will need to tear down after a few races and do maintenance
every year. You got to tear down. I tear this thing down every year, and that you got to check. And that's how I found that crack. My car started making a little less power in 2016, remember? And I tore it down and I found a crack. So yes, I agree. I agree with him 100%. I'm doing it on my car. For how long? I don't know, but I'm hitting it with a bunch of nitrous.
Let's see. Wendy English is here, checking in. Hello, everyone.
How you doing?
First Responder Garage says higher nickel is false. This info comes from a Chevy worker in an old engine plant. That's why I can't listen to any of this stuff. You really, and the sad part is you can't test it. I mean, you literally can't test it. I guess the best way to do it is like if you had two of them old blocks, right? Let's say you had the Mexican block and you had a Triple X block, and then you had a Ford Racing aftermarket block. If I would only do this if they were all ruined, but I think the only way you can test the hardness of the metal is torque the head bolts until it pulls the threads out, and see which one takes the most torque, and that's going to tell you, and you're going to
cut a corner off. Just cut a corner off and send it in for analysis.
Well, yeah, I guess you could do that too.
Yeah, if you're running an engine plate on the front, you could just take off some of the mounts on those, just break those off, send them in for analysis.
Ron Ward says, looking for a set of cut-to-fit push rods from Smith Brothers for my 440. Any feedback on their quality?
Smith Brothers is good.
Smith Brothers is probably the highest quality push rods I've ever bought in my life.
Yep.
But I don't know what you mean by cut-to-fit. Is Ron cutting himself?
Yeah. So basically, they're going to have the one on one side, and then you cut it. You basically put it in a lathe, and then you press them, and you press the end in them. When I was at Crowder, we had cut to fit also. So you basically swedge one end on there, and then the other one has got a pin on it. And it's got a hollow tube in it, and you press it in, and it's a press fit. So you would heat one up, freeze it, put it in, and then it goes in. But I've ran the cut to fit Smith Brothers before. On this car before I was actually running oil through the push rods, and they worked great. So Ron, I would say go for it because it's high quality stuff. You're going to pay for it, but it's good.
Take this time to talk about your Predator carburetor. I'm going to make a number. I got to take a leak.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyways, I brought something. I got some show and tell. So here's Mr. Predator carburetor. Let's see if I can let me get my camera back here a little bit. So this is, man, these things are awesome. It's an air demand. So this right here, you have a throttle on the bottom down here, butterflies on the bottom down here. Sorry, there's one of the rods came off. So these are your throttle blades down here. And then these are the butterflies that work on air demand. Now this rod runs right inside here, which runs on a little cam plate. And you can modify the cam plates. They come with like an A, a B, and a C right off the bat. And how that runs is that this rod here in the center, this is your fuel plate right here. And it works basically on vacuum. So I love these things. Now they don't work all that great, but they're like the magic box. They're awesome. And so I got two of these things, and they have the extra fuel on them. The biggest issue I've ever had with these things is that they only have one needle and seat. So you could never keep enough fuel in these things. So if you look at the old monster trucks, they would have 2, 3 of these things on there. Now they work great through that because they supply a lot of fuel, and they're really easy to tune as far as jets, because it's just a plate. So what a lot of them did is they would run these extra bowls on them. And I used to have a jet boat in Southern California, and I had 2 of these things on the tunnel ram, and it was badass. And I love them. I think they're great. So I got 2, and I like carburetors, so I'm going to put one up on the shelf, and then I'm going to take and see if I can. Next time we run a carburetor test at Edelbrock, I'm going to put it on one of the engines and just do a back to back against the VRS and our Holly ones that we have there, and our AVS and our AVS2, just to see where it falls in line. So let's see what people are saying. They're rare and valuable now. Really? I didn't think so, but I've got some rebuild kits for these. I basically squirreled a few of those away, so I'm going to take some and rebuild them and just get them to run again. But I just like them. I think they're awesome. I would. It'd be one of those things, if I could get them running and someone wanted to use them for a tunnel ram, I would almost like to see them run on a tunnel ram again. That'd be cool.
Oh, you're just talking about the Predators, 2 of them. That was like the early 80s, late 70s thing.
Yeah. Well, I was just telling them that they're not all that great, but they're more of like a novelty. But I just love them. I love carburetors, so I'm going to rebuild them and put them on the shelf. And
Carburetor is probably one of the greatest inventions in our community, and it was so easily tossed aside with EFI. And I did the same thing. I went to EFI. My T-Bird has EFI on it. But what I found out was, like, I just had an expensive carburetor setup is all it was. And it really doesn't do anything any better or worse. It actually makes less power. So let's see. I'm trying to catch up right now with everything that's going on.
Oh, okay.
Everybody's talking about the push rods. And
move past that.
Carburetors. So Buick Smith says, Dallas, you can use a handheld XRF to see what metals are in anything made almost. They are only about 25K.
Right.
So ouch. He's a tabletop one on Oak Island. See, and Buick Smith, he knows what he's talking about, because this guy is actually a blacksmith and does metallurgy. So that's one of my favorite things. I'd like to learn metallurgy, but I don't know where you go to learn something like that.
Books.
I don't think they have classes for it, do they?
No. Well, they probably do. I mean, but you'd have to pay for them. But if you just get some books on them, and most of them tell you, heat them at this, you cool them this, it does that, and how you change some of that. But a lot of it's just going to be basic chemistry.
BNR says it's the Predator carb is supposed to be a great root supercharger carburetor.
It is.
That's probably because of the high velocity.
Yeah, they work really good. It's fuel on demand. So like a lot of I was just saying, the Bigfoot, if you watch some of the early Bigfoots, he'd had 3 of them on his roots charger. And the biggest problem, like I was telling them, is that it only has 1 needle and seat for the carburetor. So you basically would run a bigger bowl. So that way, when you went down the track, you would try to use as much fuel. You actually empty the bowl before you could actually fill it up. And on my 454, I had a tunnel ram and I had 2 Predators on. I didn't have the bolt extensions on. I just regular ones. I put 150 needle and seats in it, and if I ran it for more wide open for more than, say, 30 seconds, it would run out of fuel. It just couldn't put enough fuel into the carburetor.
Tall Garage says, so I got to break the rockers for the Hemi Free to rebuild. What are we feeling? Vapor rust or something stronger? So I'm assuming that he's got to get all these freed up or something.
Acetone and ATF.
Like in small scale, I wouldn't mind trying out some electrolysis. But like, it's not really that hard. It's literally like distilled water and some sacrificial metal and a couple anodes. It's in a battery charger, so you're not too far away from making it work. But I'd like to try it on something small. I would see if you could freaking electrolysis that thing.
You know what I might do is that if someone's willing, I'd be willing to do this. I'm going to rebuild one of these things. And at the No Name Nationals, if somebody wants to do a well-tuned carburetor on theirs, they'll run a carburetor and we'll put a Predator on it just to see what it does, because I've got a bunch of tuning stuff for this thing. I've been squirreling stuff for Predators away for a while.
Are you and Andy still kind of doing you said you didn't know if that the Triple Crown motor that you guys were working on is still a go, right?
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't have any chance to talk to him yet.
I
I
wonder if
don't know
putting
yet.
that carburetor on it would be like the ticket. Like if you guys finish that motor, just put that carburetor on it and just like see if somebody wants to do a small block Dodge motor swap at
Yeah,
the
but I
Million
can't give him it though. I would let him use it, but I couldn't give it to him. I would need. That's something I've been working for. Um, I don't know, but I don't know.
Okay. Most of the parts Ron Ward says, Shane, do you sell Lenati stuff?
I personally don't, but the company does. Lunati still sells. They're still in business.
And I'm sure that would be under all of the stuff that Edelbrock is offering for
Yep.
this year's entrance in the No Name Nationals.
Yeah, I don't have it here anymore. I don't have the paperwork here anymore. But as far as obviously you're the voice of the No Name National, so you'll be in it. But I'm grouping everybody into the into it's called a B2B, which is a business to business type thing. It's going to be live on the 1st of February, and so you guys will be able to buy stuff at a highly discounted rate. So it's going to be good.
Ron Ward says, if I want to learn metallurgy, befriend an Amish blacksmith.
Right? Absolutely, He is correct.
Bobby Frizzell says that he's not much on EFI. I'll stick with my carburetors.
I like you too.
I like carburetors. I like the EFI. I wanted to give it a try. I'm not sold on it. I just don't think the EFI is the ticket. And maybe it's because I don't have, coil on plug and all that stuff, but I don't think that's it. I just don't think it makes the power of the carburetor. And you want to know what I think it is? I think everything has everything to do with the carburetor having a venturi and the atomization of the fuel, creating a colder temperature directly below the carburetor from fuel atomization, from changing from a liquid to a gas. And I think that's what is the gain from a carburetor.
I think it's a little bit more this way. Here's the thing: is that have you ever played a CD and then played like I remember this? We're gonna go down the rabbit hole real quick. I have Smells Like Teen Spirit on a regular record on an actual album, and then I have it on a CD. I can switch from one side to the next in my studio, and you can hear that the CD sounds clearer, but it lacks the punch. Where a record, because it's a true analog sound, has the punch. Now, digital, it's sampling. It's either on or off. So it's not a true wavelength of sound. It's a sample of sound. I believe that the reason why carburetors are always going to be, well, I shouldn't use the word always, but for right now, and for me, why they work better is because it's a true analog wave. It's basically constant flow at a steady rate, where when you have fuel injection, obviously you're injecting fuel at a time, but I think it's because you're injecting the fuel and it's not a constant state of flow where air is constantly moving through and it's going through across the venturi and causing that. And I think it has to do farther down the hole of like the difference between digital and analog. If you look at it in that aspect,
we're talking about one of my favorite things here, and that's acoustics.
Yes.
The human ear hears an analog sound. It listens to sound waves, right? Now, a record is recorded sound wave in a vertical format, believe it or not. It's not horizontal. Like everyone thinks it's horizontal because it goes out the record, but it's up and down on the record face.
Yes.
Right. So it's 3-dimensionally recorded is really what you're looking at, but it's not really 3 dimensions because it's not reading from side to side. It's actually reading just up and down, and then the record moves out because it's just one continuous line.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's why a record actually sounds more warm than a CD. The CD actually has a broader frequency spectrum that it covers, and the clarity is better, but it is analog to digital, digital to analog. You always lose something.
That's right.
Because you cannot measure the entire frequency spectrum of what that digital. Okay. If you take a sine wave and it's like an S, right? And you create it digitally, you have to chop the tops and the bottom off of the S to make it a digital 1 and a 0 signal.
Make it fly. Exactly. Yep.
And if you had something that was like, let's say a digital means that measured 4 different, like 1, 2, 0, and -2, right? You would have twice as much clarity in that digital track than you would with a CD. Um, that's the problem with analog to digital and digital back to analog, because when you convert it from analog to digital, it chops the tops off. And then when it goes from digital to analog, it cannot recreate the tops it's cut off.
Nope.
So you lose some. You definitely lose it.
Yep. I
Okay.
I agree with that 100%. Yes. That's why I've always liked analog better. That's why I've got like 5,000 records upstairs.
Hey, here's an
better.
awesome idea.
Sure.
Have Dallas Dino the Easy 302 with the Q-Jet, then with the Predator.
Perfect. There it is.
Yeah, you're going to be here anyway when I do that,
Yep.
aren't you?
Yep.
Okay. First responder garage says Predators work better on fast spinning blowers, but then again, a fast spinning blower is a great mixer. So, also, I think it might work good on a fast spinning Chevrolet small block. We'll find out.
The one thing about I've driven Predators on the street, they don't like it. They really like idle or full throttle.
Wide open.
Yeah, that's really all that. And
well,
these
it's variable Venturi carburetor, isn't it?
Yes, but what's good about these ones is they actually have the idle circuit.
Well, it doesn't have a low velocity. Low velocity does not make the carburetor work well because it's a variable Venturi.
Yes, but the way that the Venturi is in the center there. It's there's a little black rod that you can barely see right there. That's the actual Venturi. So it's a bar that goes across with a step edge, and it's got like 100 holes in there, and that's where it pulls the fuel out.
Let's see. Ron Ward is saying mostly parts. Ron Ward says, Shane question, why does Lunati list a part number for ductile iron rockers for a big block Mopar in their catalog, but shows them as discontinued? As far as I can tell, they were never manufactured.
They were at one time. They're just Lunati is going to be going to, and this is just something because I work for them. Because of the Edelbrock group, they don't want to have one company stepping on the toes of another one. So because ComCams is going to be the cam manufacturer. In fact, ComCams has been making Lunati cams for, eons now, it seems like. They're going to be basically doing the rotating assembly. So they're going to be doing cranks and rods. That's what Lunati is good for, and that's what they have. And that's actually what I'm doing for them is I'm designing all the new cranks and rods for Lunati. So that's why there's a big sale going on with the Lunati cams right now. And so there's going to be a lot of discontinued parts. But yes, at one time they did have those because I did see those in the catalog, and I was like, ooh, maybe I could find something like that for like a small block Mopar,
Ron Ward saying fuel injection equals smells like Teen Spirit, LOL. Yeah.
Smells like Lean Spirit.
Oh, Lean Spirit. Oh, I'm sorry. Lean Spirit. Yes. He says, I love vinyl, about 13 Pink Floyd albums that spin regularly.
Absolutely.
Dude, that's what we should do at the No Name Nationals this year at the cookout.
Dark Side of the Moon, baby.
Well, I got tons of vinyl too. I got tons of vinyl. I have like almost every Skinner album ever made.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, well, Buick Smith says, look at Dallas, Dr. Resonance. So, my life before this used to be, I was a sonar technician in the Navy and found submarines underwater. So I'm pretty versed in acoustics. Okay. Ron Ward says, Shane breaking out the Predator, suddenly having Bigfoot monster truck flashbacks.
It's true.
At least it's good flashbacks and not bad ones.
Right.
So, yeah. Let's see. And then he says, Dark Side is great, but my favorite is Animals.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Animals good.
I have Dark Side of the Moon, to be honest with you. But
now Pigs is good too. I like Pigs. I mean, everyone likes The Wall, but here's what I like about Dark Side is that it's one of those, it's not the only album, but it's one of the very few albums that you can literally start it at the beginning and the whole thing through plays like a story. It's a story of music, right? And that's what I really dig about it. That's why I've always enjoyed that one the best for me. Now the rest of them are, songs, and The Wall's kind of the same way, but Pink, the Dark Side of the Moon.
Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon was one of the few albums that was recorded in quadraphonic, right? It has 4 acoustic channels.
Oh,
Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
It's made for quadraphonic stereos. So, like, if you have a Marantz with 4 channels on it and a reel-to-reel, you can play back Dark Side of the Moon, and it comes in at 4 different channels. So then you can put a chair in the middle of the room, and it would hit you all at 4 different channels at the right time.
Wow.
That's what was cool about that album. But a lot of that stuff went away because it got to be all right. So that's
But you got to have a reel to reel to do that, right?
well, no, you can buy a record that's a quadraphonic recorded record as well.
I probably have it upstairs. So I have a lot of limited. I must have like 9 Dark Side of the Moon albums, and some of them are like limited editions and whatever from
if you
the
got
70s.
a quadraphonic, I'd love to get one from you if you got more than one.
Okay, yeah,
Because I have a recording. I'll just trade you for it. But I'd love to get a quadraphonic. I don't have a quadraphonic stereo, but there's only a few albums that's recorded quadraphonic. I can't remember. There used to be a list. I read it. Maybe that's something worth looking up, but maybe not tonight with 4 minutes to go. But yeah, that back in like the late 70s, early 80s, it was all about making the equipment that was fantastic to deliver you the greatest listening experience. And then what happened was we changed the equipment to making the best recording that you could. And that's where we lost things, because once we got to the best recording, if you notice, we went from CD to MP3, which is the worst recording there ever was.
Crap.
Right? Yeah, absolute garbage. It's like half of what you would get on just a record.
Yeah. What's funny is that I have a lot of old school Pioneer, basically tube style, very old type of stereos, and that I run my records through, and they are amazing sounding. You got to turn them on, let them get warmed up, and I've run them through my my studio speakers. Man, I got to tell you, it's amazing sounding.
Well, okay, and your Pioneer, I'm not busting your balls, was the middle of the grade.
Yes.
The Pioneer was just like the regular guys. It was the Japanese version of the regular guys stereo.
Yeah, I have one upstairs. I think it's called an SA 5000 or something. It's like, I'm going to Google it here.
If you go watch Dazed and Confused, at the very end of the movie, the kid comes home that's like the freshman or whatever that gets beat down that day by all those guys, and he goes to the party.
Yeah.
End of the movie, he comes home like liquored up. He'd been making out with his girl. He may have gotten laid. He didn't see that part, but he plugs in a set of headphones to like the most expensive freaking stereo you could buy. It was the one everybody wanted. But yeah, that way back in the 70s and early 80s, dude, that was the bomb. That stuff was the bomb.
Yeah, I can't remember, man. I can't remember what I had for this thing. I've got a whole bunch of them upstairs, but it's one that everybody desires. I need to get it restored now, because sometimes it clips in here, but it's I don't know. It's an older unit. I can't remember. It's the one that like it was the most powerful stereo unit ever made.
Danny Boyd says he has a Panasonic quadraphonic 8-track player and 2 quadraphonic tapes.
Yeah.
There was only like a handful of those recordings made. That was like, I don't know, probably 30. But I don't know. There was a list of them.
Yeah, I don't want to Google it right now, but man, it was a.
Rob Ward's asking if we were checked out the coincidence of the Dark Side of Oz. I have 100%. Not, but I have heard of it many times.
Actually, in San Diego, they used to have this thing called the Reuben H. Fleet Space Theater, and every Friday night at midnight they would have a Dark Side of the Moon and a laser light show. And then it's an Omnimax, right? So they would have this laser light show in there, and obviously you would there was some funny business going on in the parking lot before you go in there, but then they would start playing Dark Side of the Moon with the Oz, and then they would have a laser show on top of that. It was just amazing. I'll never forget that. But yes.
So Michael Schmidt sent us $10 like I don't know, beer cash, I guess. Best show on the boob tube.
Yeah.
So thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in tonight. We are actually at our 2-hour limit. We've been running through it tonight. This was a good one tonight. I had a really good time.
Me too.
Thanks for tuning in. Oh, here you go. Danny Boyd says one of the quadraphonic tapes is Best of Guess Who. So that would probably be a good one.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to figure out what stereo I have upstairs, but I have a stereo that literally is like what everybody wants. It's called the Holy Grail. I got it. It worked. I actually bought it at an estate sale in California.
That's where you get the good ones.
Huh?
That's where you get the good ones.
Yes. And it works. It works fine. It just needs to be restored. I don't want to plug it in and use it anymore because it has because of the wiring, but it was made in like 79 or 78.
Oh,
and
that'd be the top. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't remember. It's like they sell for like $7 or $8 grand right now.
Oh, that's the Marantz, probably. You might have a Marantz. Does it have a bunch of like needles on the front?
Yeah.
Amps and all that stuff? Okay, yeah, that might be a Marantz.
No, that doesn't sound familiar. I don't remember. I have to look at it, but and I played, and then I have a tape deck which has got an actual record player. It was a I forget the name of it, but it's got a laser on the side of it, so that way it makes the speed exactly. So you dial the speed, so that way the mirror is perfect, and then you put down your record. Oh, it's amazing sounding. Yeah, amazing.
Well, with that as a note, we got to end this live broadcast. So we will see you cats on the flip side next week, where we talk about more triple crown class, more old junk parts, and how to meter fuel properly, not using EFI.
And don't forget to go see John Wilburn on Friday night Central Time on his channel. And then after that, I'm not sure if Tony's Hot Rod Garage is doing it anymore, but he was after him. And then go see Buff Del Campo on Tuesdays, and they're always live at some point at 10 o'clock. Who knows when? So.
And then Junkyard D says switch pitch out. So we'll see you guys next week.
He gets the final word. All right.
He does.